OKRs, they're not that conducive to innovation and creativity. They're supposed to be, right? But in practice, it doesn't really happen.
OKRs was what we're going to talk about.
Yeah, right.
So
Well,
tell me yeah, I think you've read the two things that I've written so far. I've been trying to write part three, but it's just there's so much to put in it that I'm struggling to boil it down. And I realized, what I need to do is actually make several posts. Each post really should be something that has a conclusion. Here's the thing that this is about. And then I can just make as many as I like. There could be tons.
yeah, that makes
Um,
sense. I mean, I did read your posts. I reread them just now, and I have a few like quick takes based on personal experience and so on. I do realize though that you've probably had quite a lot of those from like other people writing in and so on.
oh
So
yeah,
I
but I
don't want to
love
just
them.
like give you another barrage of like purely biased personal
It's
experiences. I'm not sure how helpful that will be.
really helpful. That is very helpful because it is. I mean, I'm writing a lot of it from my biased personal experience, and
Yeah.
then chatting with other people and their biased personal experiences.
Okay.
So
Brilliant.
yeah, please do
So,
share.
I mean, the first thing I wanted to say is like everything that you wrote deeply resonates, and I feel like I've been on a very similar trajectory. I did work at Google some time ago, and I read all their books at the time, and I became a real OKR fanboy.
Yeah.
And I think after that experience, I fell firmly into the camp of, oh, you don't like OKRs? Well, you've never seen them done properly. Like that's exactly what you're describing, right? Like
Mhm.
that was me. And then more recently, a lot of the other things that you're writing about in terms of like how they're actually used in practice and there are all the practical drawbacks to them, like all the planning overhead that they generate and everything that you've described. But I love the pieces around like implicit biases against them across, employee level and executive level. But one of the things that I thought was interesting to get into maybe was also alternatives. And not in terms of like, I know you're working on this concept of adaptive OKRs, but what I mean is like existing alternatives that are already playing out in
Mhm.
organizations and what that might mean. So I had a real aha moment when I was working in an organization that was using OKRs. They had annual big planning cycles, but they would review them on a quarterly basis. So kind of like a hybrid between long term and short term. And then I started introducing hackathons and they, became more of a thing and we started having like more regular hackathons. And it was just so striking the ideas and the concepts and the built prototypes that came out of those hackathons, the level of innovation, of problem solving, of excitement by my colleagues that they brought to this, and in 2 days solved problems that I really think we could have never solved if, the outcome had just been specified by
Yeah.
an OKR. And so another drawback that you've done it implicitly, but I thought it's worth highlighting explicitly is how OKRs they're not that conducive to innovation and creativity.
Yeah.
With and again, like they're supposed to be, right? Because the idea is like, oh, every team co-owns their OKRs and then they can draw a Venn diagram between what the organization needs, what they're passionate about, apply their skills in an empower teams way and do that stuff. But in practice, it doesn't really happen. In practice, you have the PM interpreting the OKRs, and then the team breaking it down into tickets, and then everybody kind of slogs down, goes into execution mode, and gets like very, very bored. And then you give people this opportunity to like genuinely do whatever the heck they want in a 2 day period, and it just blasts everything else out of the water.
Yeah.
And then the frustrating thing afterwards is rather than say like, wow, these hackathon outputs, they're awesome, they solve a business problem, they're really good prototypes, like let's choose the best ones that work towards our objectives and like see if we can like productize some of this. No, it's like it's discarded. And then let's go back to our OKRs. And
Mhm.
I thought like that is absurd. Like we're throwing the valuable thing in the can and then go back to like pure boring delivery that no one's quite frankly inspired by for to gain what exactly? To gain predictability of mediocrity.
That's exactly what I was going to say. That ideal management is
Yeah,
predictability, and ideal innovation is unpredictability.
yeah,
So there is this tension, and it's I think that's really difficult because for the exec of the company, they're not beholden to the end consumer. They're beholden to the market, to the investors, to the quarterly earnings reports. And those are all about, did you predict what was going to happen correctly? Did you deliver us 7.5% growth?
yeah,
Exactly. Not, oh, sometimes we managed like a huge leap and sometimes it went backwards or stayed level. But no, every quarter just keep that predictable growth happening. And yeah, so the step change of innovation, I think, then becomes a tricky
yeah.
aspect.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
I mean
love that
it really
story.
does start there, right? It starts with like quarterly earnings reports to shareholders.
Yeah.
That's really the issue here, is like that cadence.
Yeah, that's why OKRs are quarterly, even when your work might not be quarterly relevant, etc., etc.
Yeah.
Yeah. But then it's funny because there is a so yeah, I'm looking to do. I think there's an article which is for so you're in charge, so you're the CEO or the COO or whatever, and you're thinking about like you're already using OKRs and you're dissatisfied, or you're considering OKRs and you're concerned. What can you do? And I think understanding that constraint helps you to decide how you want to manage it. And if you don't have to do quarterly earnings reports to shareholders, then maybe you don't want to just do quarterly because I think that's it. It all comes from these big companies. Well, they do them quarterly, so quarterly must be right. But that's a thing that you can easily question and play with. Is a
Yeah.
fun thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then so there's one today, and then there's I mean, wow, I love your story of the hackathons. I've seen the same things at places as well, and it like yeah, you get these incredible ideas coming out, and the difficulty with hackathons, I think the difficulty that executives have is that some people go rogue. So you'll get like, I don't know, a dozen teams, and three of them will solve some genuine business problem or make something that has the potential to do that. Let's say in 2 days, you're not really going to solve it like overnight, but they'll show that the biggest thing you thought was hard, they can actually resolve. And off we go, it's great. But nine teams will make something that fixes the coffee machine or counts the goals in a table football table. And it's like, well, all of that energy, why can't we direct that at what we want it to be directed at? That's what OKR should do, right? Then we're going to align everybody
Yeah.
on pointing at the right goals that we want to solve.
Yeah.
But you
Yeah, I mean, to
can't just
clarify,
focus the energy like that, can you?
when I say people at a hackathon were allowed to do whatever, there was a theme, right? Like
Yeah,
you're setting a theme, you're trying to set them on some like vague direction, but you don't want to be too constraining.
that's the
Um,
trick. You can't be
yeah,
too precise,
yeah,
but like anything goes, that doesn't necessarily work either. But it
yeah.
can. That's the thing. It's just if you can accept that you can't predict what's going to be good,
Yeah.
then
Well, but
you're okay.
also, you and I were just talking about Sturgeon spices yesterday, right? And like
Yeah,
how like 90% of everything is crap. And like, yeah, like you'll get a hackathon results that are like, yeah, this is nonsense, but you know, at least it has entertainment value. But that's fine.
exactly.
Like, you know, rinse and repeat. You have several teams, like some of it is going to be valuable. But yeah, the other two thoughts I wanted to add was one that OKRs they're kind of grounded in a pre-computational world almost, aren't
Mhm.
they? I mean, they were invented John Doerr and Intel in the 70s, I think. The world's probably moved on since then. And I think what I'm trying to say is I think it's probably become one of those like dogmatic things that's like well established. But let's not forget that they come from a different era and they're invented by the guy who invented waterfall management principles. So they might not have been created with the world in which we find ourselves in mind.
Yeah.
And then the other anecdote I wanted to share was it last year's? I'm not sure if it was last year or the year before, Web Summit, the chief product officer of Figma went on stage and he was talking about honest design processes. Well, his point was the whole, we're talking about design thinking in the double diamond, and we do some discovery, we understand the problem and so on. And that's not actually true. And personally, I really hate the double diamond, but
Yeah,
that's complete
me too.
different
Yeah.
tangent. It
Oh
doesn't
yeah.
work.
We
It's
could
been
have an
invented.
absolute go at that, and it's just
Yeah,
as nonsense here.
great. Yeah, perfect. So maybe that's a conversation for later. But what he was saying, like the reality of it is that all the great products and services out there, they didn't start with a problem. They started with an idea. Um, and crucially, that idea informed by personal experience and by intuition. And then you go out, you solve your own problem, and then you go out and you find product market fit, or you try to, to shift it to some degree to find product market fit for people beyond yourselves. And lots of great case studies and like features for Uber and like some of the other big tech companies. And that's my observation as well. And what I find interesting working with cross-functional partners, with engineers in particular, is people get really frustrated when you suggest to do research. And the main reason is that they feel like suggesting to do customer research implicitly means that you distrust their expert intuition.
Yeah.
When you're working with people and they say like, why do we have to do this, like start from scratch discovery if we've been working in this problem space for years? And and we're users ourselves and we know the problem and the solution, and like, why can't we just go and get prototyping? Fine, let's make it a few different alternative solutions. Doesn't have to be just one of mine, but like, let's just get cracking, solving the problem.
Yeah.
And and in those situations, often I've seen the flip side of it. I've seen like, okay, research wins out. Let's do some research. We come out with recommendations. Well, guess what? They're exactly what the engineer said to begin with.
Yeah.
And and like that doesn't happen all of the time, but it happens often enough to make me think like there should be a framework to make space for expert intuition.
Yep.
I'll pause there because I've ranted for quite some time.
No, but I love that. That totally, I mean, it chimes nicely with my experiences, and I think it's the theme of the OKR series, which is stated outright, is they fit with how we think business should work, but they don't work. They don't fit with how things actually work. And that's the same with the double diamond and with design thinking. It's like, well, obviously, you should go out and you should fall in love with the problem and solve the problem. But you can't do that in a linear way. Or if you do, what you're going to find is all of the obvious logical deductive things that have already been tried. You're not going to find something novel because you're just going to do the obvious things, because the obvious things are all out there and there's millions of people trying to solve the obvious things. And that's where we are today. So then I like where you're at. Like the reality of it, it starts with people who are steeped in a situation, who are frustrated, who have some sort of weird spark, intuitive leap. We were talking about this yesterday. Start with something that makes you laugh.
Yeah.
Something that is like it starts as a joke. Most good things start as a joke. And then you go, well, oh, hang on a minute, but what if? But what if? And then you pull it and you stretch it, and then you figure out where to go. And I agree with that thing. Like I've got a talk which I can share from next week, I think, which I did at UX Brighton, where the core, like the if you're looking at the story arc, the depths of despair were when I heard from a product manager at the company I was at. The trouble with research is it either tells us we're doing the thing wrong or we're doing the wrong thing. And at the time, I was like, that's the trouble with research. that's the point of research. You like setting fire to money. But I realized I was wrong. I was really wrong because nothing in the world is not wrong. Everything is just not wrong enough to work. And that's all you need. And I think there's we tend to have, as research and designers, we tend to get obsessed with the idealistic perfection state and not muddle through enough at all. And most things are fine. Well, the only way you get things going is to muddle through. Otherwise, you'll never have the time and the space and the energy to make the perfect thing because it will take infinite time. And that's not something you can argue for in your company retreat. And so then, yeah, there's that expert intuition aspect of it. And that's the whole way that I work now, is I come to the team and I go, well, I assume you know a ton of stuff. Of course you do. Let's now map out what you think is going to happen. Let's map out the story of how this is going to go. And then does any of that feel a little bit skeezy? Does any of that feel like, well, maybe we're not right about that? Then that will open the door to the research about the stuff that you're not already really confident about. And where there are disagreements as well, where it's like, well, they're certain. I've worked with engineers who they were exposed to the industry and the research and all this that we were working in. And their take was, but what they're doing is silly. They should do it my way, which is much simpler. But their way was failing to take into account all of the social constraints and the legacy constraints and all this other stuff that goes on because they were a hyper rationalized engineer and they thought you could just wave everything else away. And that in those situations, there needs to be some way to expand people's intuition through experience, I would say.
Yeah.
Because the other reality is all these ideas that people come with, we already know most of them fail in the market. So there's something that everyone's missing.
Yeah.
But
yeah. I've had designers I managed be really frustrated with me because they were trying to design the perfect product. And at the time I was always saying like, no, speed to learning is what matters. 80-20 is fine in this case. Let's just get it out.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the intuition piece, I mean, tactically, this is really interesting to me because what I think I've intuitively been doing at some points and what you've described in a more, methodological way is actually starting with the expert view, because we're doing process mapping already anyways, right? You're doing the kind of like whole blueprinting, user journey mapping, whatever you want to call it, but like getting some view of like what we think the end-to-end for the customer is going to be, and just doing a quick sense check of that and saying like, okay, cool, like here is what we think. What's our confidence level for each of these things to focus the efforts after that is a really good point.
Yeah, in the deck, there's a really nice method for that I stole from Liz Keogh, estimating complexity, which doesn't ask people to estimate their level of confidence because we're terrible at guessing what impact is going to be and what effort it's going to take.
Yeah.
Absolutely awful. I've never seen anyone get anything right, ever. So it's not really a good way to work, I would say. She does estimating complexity is just, have we done it before? Has anyone we know done it before? Or has no one we know done it before? Have we all done it before on the team? If we've all done this before, then it's a green. It's easy. If we know someone in the company who's done it before, then it might be like a yellow. And if we don't know anyone who's done this before, then it's a red.
Yeah.
And then we want to just run at the red things and spike or prototype or whatever, figure them out.
Yeah, I've done this in I think this is particularly pertinent now that we're all working on AI, to varying degrees, and it's almost like doing R&D and development at the same time to get something out quickly because we know everything's going to change again in a month. And so what I've done on a previous project is on a generative AI project is just get the data scientists involved and say like, this problem here, have you seen a research paper? Like, is anything known about what we can do here? And then
and they know how to
exactly
go
what you say, like,
the...
have you done it? Have you tried it? And then if the answers to those are yes, then we're like, okay, great. Like maybe we can start, ideation around this then.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's good. Yeah, and I love it. And there's that way of bringing the team together and getting the sense of together, oh, actually, we don't know that. And on there was several teams I've been on, but the best teams, once they see that there's that red gap, people just naturally go and work on that. You
Yeah.
don't have to manage that to happen, try
Yeah.
and push people to do it. It just becomes like, oh yeah, Jesus, that's not good that we don't know that. Maybe I should go and find out.
I guess there's a piece around how do you manage assumptions that are strongly held but obviously wrong.
And that is the hardest thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's my beef with assumption mapping in general, is people don't write down the assumptions that they don't realize are assumptions.
Yeah.
If it's a strongly held belief,
Exactly.
if it's just what you think the world is like, it's not an assumption. It's a fact. I'm not writing down facts. So yeah, and there's also this effect. You see this in research papers. There is a core of a hard core of assumptions that if you question those, you might defund the whole project, or you might get the team to stop working on this thing that you kind of want to work on, or you're not sure that you'll have a job if your team no longer exists. Better not actually look at those. But we can question all these peripheral ones. They're safe to change. We can fiddle with them as long as we like. And that's the core risk. So what I do for that is the time machine exercise. So when we know this is the plan, we're going to build this thing, time machine exercise, with just pre-mortem, but with the
Mm.
framing specifically, we've got there to the future where we've done this, brilliant. We've done our best work at this, and it's gone so wrong, we wish we'd never started. And then all of those hidden hardcore of assumptions do tend to come out, but in a sort of oblique narrative way. But that opens the door again. That's what cracks open the door to research and experimentation, and lets people slowly let go of, let's just build it. And the
Yeah.
only way we can learn is to build the whole thing and then ship it and measure and learn, or build it all, ship it, build the next thing, as is more likely.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, on the wrong
How have
assumptions.
you managed to handle that? Yeah.
Well, I mean, the biggest assumption strongly held for me are obviously like, do you understand the customer problem? And it's particularly pertinent when you have founders who worked in an industry. They may have been a future user themselves,
Yeah.
and they just build an entire value proposition purely around the personal experience. And then they go on selling their solution, and they might even succeed because they have that industry background, and they might be able to get some customers. But then they're not, the thing comes falling down when they fail to properly serve those customers and certainly retain those customers. And then, it's far too late. But then also the sunk cost is so great that it becomes even more difficult to investigate why that may actually have been the case.
Yeah.
And which is another huge concept I think to bear in mind here is the influence of sunk cost in decision making, like the shorter term. It's almost like the business wants to plan long term, but actually to minimize risk, the shorter term planning you can possibly do is the best because that ensures that you're not doing things just because you have been doing them.
Mhm.
Uh,
There's an interesting idea from the strategy tactics deck and from all the way back to Akoff via Jabe Bloom, which is the burn it down principle. So you have to you imagine that everything we've built so far, we've come in this morning and it's all gone. It's been destroyed. And then you think, well, okay, we're free of that now. We've got total free reign. If we had to start again, would we build what we built before? Often no. Well, what would we build instead? What would you do instead? Now you're free. And that's an interesting exercise to run. But yeah, I've definitely seen what you describe. And The other classic pattern you get with that sort of founders start with a strongly held understanding of their market because they were in it and they know how to build for it for themselves. That works really well for the initial product offering. But then 2, 3 years pass, and now they need to add to the value proposition, or they need to find another to shore themselves up, because that first thing often doesn't have that great a moat or is fragile in various different ways. So they need to be able to discover more problems. But now they're not in the market anymore, and the market's moved on, and they don't know.
Mm.
And you get then the tricky second product problem, because the first time round, well, they used their intuition and they nailed it. They were spot on. So that should work next time, right? And we'll just do that again and it'll be fine. Only they can't do that again because it's not that anymore. So that's a killer.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think a lot of the time the solution is just that, isn't it? Is because you can't change the minds of people who don't want to have the minds changed, right? So often it's just to say, yeah, let's talk again in a year.
Yeah, go knock yourself out. You're gonna have a good time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And the other, I mean, that's yeah, what the time machine can sometimes do is it just flicks on the light of, oh, this actually might not work
Yeah.
in some of these people. But you also then see when the shutters come down again, and they're like, no, I will not allow myself to think of that.
Yeah.
One other pattern I thought of, which was reminded, is often, well, this is the classic vision chasm situation. You're sitting there, you're thinking, oh yeah, do a startup, do a startup. Imagine how cool it will be in the future when we've got this incredible marketplace where these people and these people are connected, and it's all wonderful, and we've got you know, whatever, various different cat owners are all there hanging out in this infrastructure, and all of the local vets are really keen on it, and cat food sellers, and we've got this wonderful marketplace, and it's going to be so cool. But there's this chasm between today and there, because there's no way to get the cat owners to join. There's no way to get the vets to join. There's no way to get, like, you have no first step on the journey to that marketplace.
Yeah.
And then we get back to Gall's law, which I think, do you know Gall's law? It's one of my favorites. I have to look it up though. I need to do a hotkey shortcut for it. A complex system that works is invariably found to have evolved from a simple system that worked. A complex system designed from scratch never works and cannot be patched up to make it work. You have to start over with a working simple system.
Yeah. That's exactly it.
Yeah. But it
That's
gets
what I mean,
really difficult.
that's what an MVP should be, really, but a lot of the time isn't.
No. Well, then you get the bucket of features problem.
Yeah.
If we can just put all the features in a bucket, eventually it'll be an MVP and people will see the value.
Yeah.
And it doesn't work like that.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Nice. Okay.
So
So then, what would your thoughts be? Yeah, what would you like the next articles to answer or deliver?
wow, obviously really keen to hear more about a solution. I think you've offered some inklings of where it's gonna go, and I do agree with that, because it's the same thing, right? Like, it's hard to reinvent something. You gotta evolve it, because otherwise, like, people are just not gonna take it on board. So yeah, so solutions would be nice. I think a couple of things that we've talked about that are really important to cater for, right? One is, how do you well, first of all, how do you actually build what's valuable for your customer? How do you engage your team in bringing their greatest skill and inspiration to solving the problems that need solving?
Yeah.
How do you maintain a degree of adaptability such that when new information comes in, when you're learning new things, you're able to pivot or maneuver around that and reshape your objectives and your work? And at the same time, how do you provide predictability to management, alignment with the rest of the organization if there's like a multi-team effort, those kinds of things, which does sound a bit mutually exclusive. So I'm excited to hear your take on those.
Yeah. Yeah, and it does get really tricky when you've got like masses of dependencies across different teams.
Yeah.
And if in order to do something, like in order to do this thing that is obvious that we need to do,
Yeah.
you're going to have to do a multi-year effort where several teams are all combining forces to re-platform something or whatever.
Yeah. And I think our conversation yesterday added an interesting nuance to this again around 90% of everything is bad.
Hmm.
How do you manage such a process? Even if you get the process perfectly right, let's say we tick all of the boxes that I just listed,
Yeah.
still 90% of everything will be bad. So how do you stop that fact from discouraging everyone around it to say like, oh, it's just the process that's not working. So like we
Mm.
tried something else, but it's still falling apart. And
Oh,
then
yeah.
the second one on that is if 90% of everything is bad, if 90% of all the people in an organization are bad, that would have different management requirements, right? Because as you pointed out in your, I think, first article on this topic, a big piece of value of OKRs is to manage people's work in the truest sense of the word, right? It's like, okay, there's an old-fashioned assumption if I don't tightly manage people, they're just not going to do what's valuable or nothing at all, or do it badly. So I need a tool to manage them. The reality is that might actually be true for a lot of people because their motivation's not right, or they're being underpaid, or they're being extremely stressed, or whatever the reasons are. And then you have the top performers in an organization, right? So who really just need a lot of freedom and inspiration to go and hunt down the problems and solutions that they're after. So I hope that's nothing too controversial what I've just said, but any kind of process that you apply across an organization should probably recognize the differences across those problem spaces and populations.
Yes. I mean, I completely agree. And then, I mean, different sorts of roles just have fundamentally different contributions to the system.
Yeah.
Then, yeah, and I think there's a mistake of becoming fully atomistic and individualistic and imagining that if you just could hire top performers into every role, then everything would be wonderful. And the way to do that is to rank everybody and get rid of the bottom performers. Like that's going to go badly wrong for you, and it's you're just going to keep suffering through the same burnout cycles. The other extreme is to say, no, it's all systemic. And every person is effectively a blank slate. This is also wrong. Every person is a blank slate. And if we make the system right, then we'll get all of the behaviors that we want. And the reality is some dynamic in between those two, that individuals do have intent and intelligence and identity, but they also fit into roles, and roles have structure and context, which create certain affordances and certain levels of agency. And the organization is also full of assemblages, stories, and narratives that guide what it is that we do here, what's okay to do, what's not okay to do, what's okay to perceive, what's not okay to perceive. And but then we're getting into a whole other world.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I think that's an important nuance to add to what I said because it's not like people are inherently like bad or good and they fall into the 10% or the 90%. It's like everybody exists in the context in which they're in.
Yeah.
They're being enabled to do different things, and I've seen people with great potential underperform and vice versa because of that. And the process that you're using to structure their work and allocate performance bonuses and the rest of it plays a massive role in that. But yeah.
And then you get into Goodhart's law and the problem of distorting the system or distorting the data. And then there was an interesting thought from Adam Grant, which is Cristiano Ronaldo. When a team gets Cristiano Ronaldo, he makes the team worse.
So yeah,
Best,
give the ball to him.
yeah, and also he's selfish.
Yeah.
And he's a prima donna and a star. And so, yeah, give the ball to him. And also, he won't support the whole team because he's the Cristiano Ronaldo show. I think it was something like that. I don't really know about football, but apparently that's a thing.
I mean, this is no longer on topic, but that's a rare thing to say, and I really appreciate that. I'm not a big football person myself, and I've rarely had male friends because of it.
Yes. What else can we kind of coalesce around?
Yeah.
Woodwork?
Well, that would work. Done some good ceramics last year.
Did you? I got really into pottery, ceramics and stuff. I haven't got any of my pottery in here, but yeah, loved it.
Here you go. There's
Oh, that's nice.
a little.
Was that a wheel job?
That is a wheel job. I do only
You got the
turning. I
nice.
have no patience for everything else. I love turning or
So
throwing.
I really liked turning as well. I want to do more.
Yeah. I
I
love
did.
it when somebody else does the preparation. Oh wow, that's really good.
That's one that we actually kept and still use, but that wasn't even turned. But the bit that I love about turning, I think we're going to do a podcast episode where we talk a little bit about the classic pottery anecdote. But the bit that I love is you have to be okay with fucking a load up.
Yeah.
Because that's how you learn, is just by getting used to the feel of it and where the limits are.
Yeah.
And it's not something you can logic your way into. You've got to embody it.
Yeah. I also, on that note, I really got into pottery, into throwing particularly, until I realized how much work goes into just preparing the mud.
Mm.
And I was like, okay, if I do actually go, all in on this and like put up a studio at home and so on, I'm gonna end up spending 70% of the time just on mud preparation. I'm not sure I'm keen on that. Because
Yeah,
every one of those failures, you have to recycle yourself manually.
you do. Yeah,
It's
yeah.
not,
With the
I'm
big
not, I'm
wet
not into
bins
that.
and then the like they're doing all the, I forgot what it's called now. But yeah, all of that stuff. It just and
Yeah.
it's non-trivial, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. It's one of those things that's like an iceberg. You think like, oh, somebody just like took 10 minutes to do this, fired it done. And then they're like, no, actually to make one thing end to end probably takes about a week.
Yeah.
Um,
It's crazy, isn't it? And it reminds me, I did a screen printing trial day as well.
mm,
And I absolutely loved that. And I've got some of my screen prints up in the house. But what you realize is it's 95% preparation and cleaning up.
yeah.
And then you get 10 minutes of actually screen printing in the middle. And that's, yeah, it's crazy. And I think all crafts are like that, aren't they?
Yeah, I was gonna say not unlike design, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah. The bit that everybody sees, the shiny bit, is in Figma, but 95% of it is nowhere near that.
Yeah, yeah. Or like decorating your house, filling all the holes and
Oh God, trauma triggered. Yeah.
yeah. So, well, thanks so much for taking the time again. This was really cathartic, and I would love to, I would love to ask you to spill the goods and just tell me the answers, but I'll have to wait for number 3 and 4.
I think what you've done is just shown, oh God, there's actually loads more here to deal with than I thought. But there's that's the magic, I think, of the process magic, the pain of it. But it's embracing the fact that there's just a ton here. But there are some things that are manageable. And it comes back to, well, what are the constraints? What are the
Yeah,
constraints and constructors? What can you tweak and see what comes out of it? And I think that's
yeah, and again, like swallowing our own medicine, like evolution, incremental improvement, all that. That's not good. I wouldn't expect anyone to have like, oh, here's the answer to all of those problems.
yeah.
Um,
If you just set up your company like this, it will run
yeah,
perfectly.
exactly. Oh, yeah, and also it universally works for every organization, of course.
Absolutely,
Um,
yeah.
but yeah, if I think if there was a way to keep people inspired and on track, put it in one
Hmm.
line, I think that would be nice.
That is really interesting. Yeah. And there is, I think then you get to, sorry if you've got to go, do let me know. But that fundamental, that gets at the big beef I have with alignment and the need for alignment is it's extremely linear. It's like, well, we're here, we want to get there, so there's a direct line. Let's just go that way. What are you waiting for? Why can't you go that way? And often, and you see this in design, the reality is you have to kind of go over here first. I think I've got it in one of the articles, haven't I? How do you get to Tipperary? Well, if I were you, I wouldn't start from here. And that is the challenge I think everyone's up against. And it's this desire to not have what looks like waste, which is the exploration of here's a bunch of directions we could go from here, and we can take little steps and then go, oh, yeah, well, that's actually exciting. That's different from what we thought. Maybe we don't want to go to where we thought we wanted to go. Maybe this is even better. But there often aren't systems or processes for that to happen, even.
Yeah, because it isn't the process. It's non-linear. It's, input and output, and inside of it, in AI, we're always talking about the black box problem.
Yeah.
So people's heads are a black box, and sometimes you just feed it with stuff, and stuff comes out, and I don't know what happened in the middle.
No, and they don't either. Like it's
No.
not even we're not even able to, but what comes out is a justification. We can absolutely justify it, but that's
Yeah.
not what happened. There's a really nice it's a really old video, but it stands up really well. And it's Dave Snowden talking about knowledge management principles. And one of the key principles is people don't know how they know what they know. And they won't tell you, they can't tell you how they actually decided how they actually make decisions. We don't actually know how we make decisions. And the example he uses is he tells this evocative story of flying to an oil rig, and it's on a helicopter, and he's not enjoying it because this is not his kind of thing. And there are rig workers on the helicopter too who are looking at him like he's an idiot because he's on all fours panicking, and this is normal for them. And he looks down and sees that the landing pad, there's like waves crashing over it, and it vanishes under the surf and then clears again. And he says to the pilot, well, you can't land on that, right? And the pilot says, no, no chance. And he thinks, oh, great, well, we'll just go home and it'll be fine. And the pilot says, you're going to have to jump. So they're going to hover nearby, and he's going to have to jump off. Meanwhile, he's then asking the expert rig worker guy, how are you? The expert rig worker is saying, well, here's what we need to do, and he's like, well, how do you know that we're not even on the rig yet? And the guy says, well, can't you hear the music of the rig? It's obvious. I can hear it in the sound that the rig is making. And Dave thought back to, well, hang on a minute. A week ago, when I asked you how you decide what to do, you gave this structured linear process. You never mentioned the music of the rig. Like that was never part of it. And what it turns out is, yeah, what you do is give when somebody asks you how do you decide it, you obviously give a linear logical justification that would stand up so that people can feel comfortable that you are using logical thought, etc., etc. But the reality of how people make decisions is entirely tacit and entirely like an intuitive sense of what's going on.
Yeah.
That was a good one.
It's a neural network now, informed by millions of learning experiences.
Oh, yeah.
So, sorry about the truck in the background. It's garbage.
No, I didn't even hear that. Cool, but there you go. This video is quite good. Also gets into other principles like you can't conscript knowledge. Knowledge can only be volunteered. So if you tell somebody to go and like write down their knowledge, that's not going to work out very well. Especially then, because we can say a lot less than we know, and we can write a lot less than we can say.
It's funny you say that because I am so impressed by people like yourself who go out to conferences and talk about a topic. I am not entirely incapable of doing that, but I find it extremely, extremely hard I always feel like I'm very good at responding to a specific problem and the person. So like panel discussions are great because everybody's like, oh, I've had this challenge. Like, what should I do? And I'm like, great, I can react to that.
We've got an actual context, a situation.
Exactly.
Off we
But
go.
like in abstract generic terms, thinking about what isn't obvious to other people is like, I don't know how you do it.
It's really hard. That's the answer.
Yeah.
But one trick is that I've heard several people say that you've probably heard, but what would you want to tell yourself 2 years
Yeah.
ago or a year ago that yourself didn't find obvious and now you think is? And so yeah, that sort of thing
Yeah.
can help. But otherwise, it's a lot of previews, effectively. Have a lot of conversations and see what themes come up and then what stories fit with that.
Yeah, exactly. Not in a vacuum.
Exactly.
I will drop now. I've got another client call in a couple of minutes. Oh,
Amazing.
does that work?
It works for me because
Oh, it
it's
works.
something to do with Mac, the latest Mac OS.
Oh, right.
It's
Okay.
quite ridiculous. But yeah, anyway, good. Thanks, Thomas. Lovely to chat again.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate
Yeah,
that.
looking forward to the next edition and stay in touch. Let me know if you
Lovely.
ever want to problem solve something else again. This was good fun.
Yeah, good fun. And likewise to you. Happy to help out with, if you're figuring something out. Planning a conference talk. Let's do it.
Appreciate it.
Later.
All right. Take care.